Yesterday we were talking and thought, oh, 8 days away. Who are the top 8 quarterbacks in BYU football history?
I've not sweated more about a topic in the history of this show. We're going to give you the top 8 quarterbacks in BYU history. This is QBU. I just want to reiterate that. This is QBU. And I have a QBU shirt. I totally forgot to wear it today.
I kind of know what the College Football Playoff Committee feels like when they're trying to get 4 teams in.
This is harder. No.
You think this is harder?
No, they have like 6 teams to deal with. We had like 15 QBs to deal with, okay?
So many
Their job's
talented,
easy. Put me on the playoff committee.
Quarterbacks at BYU. Wait, so we'll go through the list, and then we'll read you the list of names that didn't get in.
Yeah.
Like those considered. It is crazy. Okay, at number 8.
There was so much debate on this first one.
John Beck.
2006, 11-2, 9th most passing yards in a season, beat Utah in dramatic fashion, probably the second best play in BYU history. Became a second-round pick. John Beck's number 8. Ugh.
Over 11,000 career passing yards.
Yeah. And he had great volume because he started games in 4 different seasons, right? He was the guy the last 2 years, kind of last 2.5.
He was the quarterback that got BYU back on track after 3 consecutive losing seasons.
And a 500 season. They had 4 non-winning seasons in a row. Yeah.
John Beck at number 8. At number 7, a guy who went to his high school, Max Hall.
Yeah, absolutely, Mountain View. 32 wins. The winningest quarterback in BYU history, Max Hall, joined the program recently. Beat Utah twice. That matters. Dynamic group of 3 and 4 with Dennis Pitta, Austin Collie, Harvey Unga. Still hates Utah. Still hates them. He had 3 3,000-yard passing seasons. That's incredible. Not everybody on this list had 3 seasons to be the guy. Max did, and he took full advantage. All 3 seasons, top 25 finishes, 3,000 passing yards, 10-plus wins. Boom.
Like we hear David Nixon talk about that run between 06 and 08 when BYU didn't lose a home game.
Yeah.
Okay, so there was John Beck, and then Max Hall was the quarterback for 2 of those seasons.
Yeah, Max was awesome, dude.
Power 5 win in his first ever start against Arizona.
Beat a top 5 team, right?
Was BYU ever unranked when Max Hall was the quarterback?
Just the start of 07, maybe.
It's crazy.
When BYU lost a lot, and so it's like, how good are they? And then BYU starts 1 and 2.
lived in the rankings
but, yeah.
with Max Hall.
Yeah.
At number 6, Gifford Nielsen.
Do we have to say Elder S. Gifford Nielsen when we do this one?
Yeah.
College Football Hall of Famer. That's enough to be top 6, right? All-American in 76. Why? Because he led the nation in passing yards and touchdowns. 3,400 yards and 30 touchdowns. That sounds like a good number, right? Rewind to 40 years, right? It was a different era. Those were bonkers numbers. BYU's second bowl game ever, the Tangerine Bowl in 76. It was a big deal. When BYU went to the Fiesta Bowl in 74 with Gary Scheide, who's not in the top 8, and he was good, there were 11 bowls. 11! Now there's like 4,000. I think there's like 40, 41. Yeah.
If Gifford Nielsen doesn't break his leg in week 4 against Oregon State in 1977, he wins the Davey O'Brien Award. He wins the Sammy Baugh Award. He might have won the Maxwell Award for crying out loud.
Yeah, he would not have won the Heisman. That was Earl Campbell. But he would have been top 3.
In a wishbone-heavy, run-heavy college football environment was going to win the Heisman. But Gifford Nielsen would have won every other prominent quarterback award.
Sports Illustrated flew to Corvallis to do a cover story on him, and he breaks his leg.
He was the guy.
It's a Mark Wilson.
Yeah, Sports Illustrated flew there because he was the guy that was going to challenge Earl Campbell for the Heisman Trophy. But he finishes top 2 if he doesn't break his leg. He was doing unprecedented things. When he broke his leg, there was this feeling over BYU that we're never going to see another great quarterback like that again.
Oh, if they only knew, the run had just begun.
And
oh, my gosh.
With that said, we continue our countdown. At number 5, Robbie Bosco.
The QB who led BYU to its national title. 3rd in the Heisman voting that year. 66 career touchdowns. He won his first 14 starts. His first 14.
That's pretty good.
Brandon Doman did that as well, by the way. Not on the list.
Including wins over Boston College, Pittsburgh, and Michigan in those 14 starts.
Not bad. 5th in passing yards all time at BYU. Robbie Bosco, man. He was the guy who led BYU to its national title.
Robbie Bosco was drafted into the NFL, 3rd-round pick, played with the Green Bay Packers.
And we need to preface this. This is at BYU only.
Yes.
This is at BYU only. We are not including whole career. Okay.
Because of what they did. In fact, all 4 of the guys that we have listed thus far have started games in the NFL. How about that?
I would hope so. Yeah.
At number 4, another guy who started plenty of games in the NFL, and the guy who followed Gifford Nielsen, Mark Wilson.
1979 is probably the most underrated team in BYU history. They start the season 11-0. They lose the bowl game. They miss a field goal that they should have made. But Mark Wilson beat out Jim McMahon for the job the year before in 78. They kind of did a two-quarterback thing. It didn't work. Lavelle Edwards later said that was a mistake. In 79, Mark Wilson was the guy. Jim McMahon redshirts. You're the guy that makes Jim McMahon redshirt? Are you kidding me?
You were that good.
Third in the Heisman voting, first-round pick.
Mark Wilson.
Yeah, he was awesome.
So close to having BYU with an undefeated
That would have been
season
the
in
first.
1979.
This close, man.
At number 3, we're into the top 3. Celebrating 8 days away, it is number 8, Steve Young.
Second in the Heisman voting to Rozier, right?
Mike Rozier, Nebraska.
83. He threw for 3,900 yards, 33 touchdowns in 1983. Perhaps the greatest season in BYU football history. 84? What? We've talked about it.
I think based on who they beat and how they had to beat them.
Yeah, 11 wins in a row to end that season. BYU finished 7th in the final AP poll, which up to that point was the highest ranking in BYU history at any point.
It put BYU on the radar so they could do what they did in 1984. They weren't like an entirely unknown commodity in 1984.
Right. But they were out of the polls.
They were
off the radar.
unranked, but people knew who they were because of Steve Young.
Auburn in 2011, was the first team to go unranked to national champ since BYU in 84.
How about
And
that?
Steve did something against Utah that was significant, which brings us to our stat of the day.
It's the BYU Sports Nation stat of the day.
The BYU quarterback record holder for touchdown passes against Utah is Steve Young with 6.
Yep.
I assume that was in 83. I never looked, but yeah.
Steve
83.
Young beat UCLA in the Rose Bowl. I mean, this guy had some big-time wins for BYU. And, of course,
Yes,
his
the
finale
greatest-
against Missouri.
The greatest BYU quarterback in the USFL by far.
He's still getting
No
paid
doubt.
for that. I'm pretty sure he's still getting a paycheck for that. All right, down to the top 2. And here's the thing.
hey.
This will be debated by everybody.
It's Detmer versus McMahon. It's Detmer versus McMahon.
At
Who's 1, who's 2?
Number 2, Ty Detmer.
Okay, I know both arguments for this, but we came to this conclusion, and let's discuss. This is BYU's only Heisman Trophy winner, led NCAA college football history for a long time. 15,000 career passing yards. That was number 1 for 13 years. His 121 touchdowns was number 1 in NCAA history for 16 seasons. Okay,
Wow.
so forever, right? Why is he number 2? We'll get to that in a moment. But Ty, you could argue Ty's the GOAT here at quarterback. I totally get it.
If somebody said Ty Detmer was number 1, I'd be like, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
We had to go 2 and 1, so we weren't going to go 1A and 1B. Okay.
He owns the greatest win in BYU football history,
Yes,
beating
absolutely.
Miami, the number 1 team, who finished number 3 that year.
Best stats, best win, amazing. But the number 1 quarterback in BYU history is Jim McMahon.
Jim McMahon.
McMahon did what no one will ever do again. He set 75 NCAA records.
At one point in 1980,
career.
he had broken 71 NCAA records in a season. 71.
First 4,000-yard passer in NCAA history, 47 touchdowns. That didn't include the bowl game, by the way, which they do now. It would have been 5,000 yards and 51 touchdowns.
Whoa.
And that was in about 3 quarters of play generally. It wasn't even 4 quarters.
Okay.
12-1 that season. 12-1 that season in 1980, his junior year. Of course, the greatest play in BYU football history in the Miracle Bowl. Top 5 in Heisman voting, not once but twice. He is the greatest quarterback in BYU history, 5th pick. I just don't think we'll see anybody like McMahon do what they did when they did it.
5th pick overall in the NFL draft, as Jarom just mentioned. He got BYU over the hump of having not won a bowl game.
And more than that, they took down mighty SMU.
And then he came back the next year, and
yes.
BYU beat Washington State, helped out by a pick 6 from one Tom Holmoe.
Yes, and this was the year after 79. You lose Mark Wilson, first rounder. You bring in this redshirt quarterback. Yeah, others considered. Scheide, Sark, Hill, Doman, Carter, Walsh, Federick.
Think about that. Gary Scheide, Steve Sarkisian, Taysom Hill, Brandon Doman, Virgil Carter, John Walsh did not get in.
This is QBU. There's no school with a greater history of quarterbacks than BYU. Like, this is my favorite topic
It's incredible.
we've ever discussed.
Incredible.
BYU quarterbacks. They're so good.